So we'll start with our second virtual meet, and uh, today we'll be recapping. Now we'll try to synthesize lesson 1 to 3. Okay, so I was actually looking into your outputs, and I started already rating your outputs in your Molly, and you can also check the grade book. No, you have your grade book in Molly. You can check your grade book if na-rate niyo yung assignments or yung outputs. So this is the flow of our today's session. No? So we'll be, of course, discussing or recapping concepts in lesson 1. The lesson 1 consists of 2 topics, the basic concepts and the principles of high quality assessments. Then to be followed by, of course, we'll try to revisit yung case analysis, which is in the discussion board 1. Then we'll entertain questions. Then this will be followed by presentation of outputs in lesson lesson 1 application activity. So I have selected some groups to present their outputs later on. Then next is, of course, a discussion on synthesis on lesson 2, which is the types of selected response tests. Then followed by presentation of output in lesson 2. Then we'll entertain some question and answer. The last part is on the recap of lesson 3, which focus on interpretation of assessment results. Okay? So wala tayong presentation of outputs for lesson 3 because I have not seen anybody yet submitting their output. So we'll just skip this part and we'll just proceed to the question and answer. Lesson 1, as I mentioned, consists of 2 topics. We talk about basic concepts, then the principles of high quality assessment. So before we proceed with the concepts, now I have some few questions here. Nasa poll. You can go to your activities. If you're using your computer, you can see the activities icon nasa lower right, yung may symbol na triangle, square, and circle. Nakita niyo ba? If you're using your cell phone, I think you go to the 3 dots menu, then you can see the activities. So I have 3 questions now. It's a poll, and I will launch that one, then you can respond, then we'll proceed to the next question. Okay, kindly take your vote. What is the answer? Blank refers to the process of determining the quantity of achievement of learners by means of appropriate measuring instruments. I see 1 vote. I'll give you 1 minute. Okay. 1 vote for assessment. Okay. We have also votes for measurement. We have also votes for evaluation. Everything that we discussed is already in your CPE105 ebook. Okay, time's up. So end ko yung poll. I think I have seen 10 people who actually rated. Okay, nag-11 na tayo out of 29. Okay, so end ko. So I'll show the result of that question, and majority answered measurement. Okay, so correct. The answer is actually measurement. Now, if you have read our ebook, I'll discuss later on the key concepts in the definition of or description of measurement. Okay, let me go to the next question. Okay, can you take your vote? Number 2 is blank is a process by which information is obtained relative to some known objective or goal. Okay, I have 13 votes. 5 seconds. Okay, 16. Okay, and ko yung poll, show ko yung answer. All right. So there are 12 votes for assessment. Okay. So the correct answer for that question is, or for that item is assessment. Last question for this topic, for this part. Blank refers to the process of determining the quality or worth of achievement in terms of a certain standards. Okay, and I have 22 votes. Show quick answers. So majority answered evaluation, and that is correct. Okay, so yay, that's good. Now, let's go back to the concepts. Now, let's go back to the concepts. Before we start, before we describe, no, I know you have read this already, but as I've said, this is only a recap of this topic, no, basic concepts. So the assessment actually starts with the cyclic process. So the cyclic process starts with the definitions or refinement, no, of student learning outcomes. So if you have seen the syllabus, that's part actually of the cyclic process. So it starts with the definitions and refinement now of student learning outcomes based on the input from the stakeholders. Sino ba yung mga stakeholders? These are actually community, the parents, the students, no? So mayroong tinatawag na survey conducted, no? Maybe your parents were not part of the survey, but in general, it's conducted, no? Philippine-wide. And then the same thing with when you translate this one in the classroom, we will follow the same procedure, no? Yung the cyclic process. Okay, that's why in my case, I always ask the students, no, mga survey, meron tayong wrap up, so that I could see what needs to be done and to improve, no, as we go along with the process, no, sa in this course. Then number two is design. No? Yung step two is design assessment tools, criteria, standards, no, that directly link to each outcome. Now, I have shared to you my rubrics. Tama ba? Every time you have your learning application activity, meron kayong rubrics. You know already what are expected of you. So, and you know already you can actually perfect, no? You get the perfect score based on the rubric. Okay? So my rubric describes the criteria and the standards. So the same thing when you will become teachers, you also do that one. No, you have to design assessment tools and share the tools to your students because you don't want your students to get mistake. You want them to perform at their best. Yan ang pinaka-importante, no? So you want to see your students perform at their best. Okay. Then step three is, of course, you implement the assessment tools. To implement is to gather evidence of student learning. This is where it helps you improve also your teaching skill at the same time improve student learning. So it's a win-win process, no? At the same time, you're improving your teaching skills because you will become teachers soon. At the same time, you're also helping your students improve their learning. Then, of course, ang step four is you're going to analyze and evaluate the collected data. You don't just collect scores, get the scores, tapos lagay mo sa drawer sa desk mo. No, you need to utilize and use that data at the same time improve maybe your learning, your pedagogy, probably your approach, no, your methods and assessment procedures. So it helps, no, technically it helps the teacher improve his pedagogical skills. Then identify gaps between the desired, that's step five, identify the gaps between the desired and actual results. So meron kang, this is what I want, no? Itong gusto kong mangyari, no, as a teacher, sa part ng teacher. Tapos this is the actual results. So maybe hindi nag-match yung expectation mo with with the actual results. So that creates now gap, right? So identifying gaps is very important because you need to address the gaps, right? That's why um, when I was teaching in the elementary schools, I always make sure that I have conducted my diagnostic test. Yung the diagnostic test will determine the strengths and weaknesses of your students. Remember, when a student or when a pupil enters your grade level, halimbawa, you're teaching grade 5, no? I'm referring to elementary schools. If you're teaching grade 5, yung mga most of your students or pupils are coming from grade 4, tama ba? So definitely by in our curriculum, merong mga skills now intended for grade 4 at saka may mga skills or competencies intended for grade 5, right? So, ang expectation natin is dapat lang 75% mastery level. Yung ang target, national target natin eh, sa proficiency level ng mga bata. 75% lang. Yeah. And then, you want to know if I am the teacher in grade 5, I want to know if yung mastery level ng mga bata sa grade 4, which is coming to my grade, nakuha ba nila yung 75% or not? That's why I need to conduct a diagnostic test. The diagnostic test will tell me the strength level and the weaknesses level of my incoming pupils. Okay? So that's the time if I see, wala, 50% lang mastery level ng mga bata sa grade 4. That's why I need to bridge the gap. Okay? So importante may bridging sa gap so that when the students starts learning the skills or competencies in that certain grade level, hindi na sila mahihirapan. Okay? So I hope you got my point. Huh? Then the last step is, of course, you need to document the results. Outline the needed changes in the curriculum for instructional materials or teaching strategies. All right? So these are the assessment cyclic process. So pabalik-balik lang yan. After the step 6, balik ka na naman sa step 1. So once you have documented the results, you're able to outline the needed changes, then refine the student learning outcomes. Okay? So balik ka naman sa step 2, 3, 4, and so on. Ulit-ulit yung cyclic process. Kaya that's why we call it cyclic process because it's a cycle. Next is the key concepts about measurement. Now, we said, no, measurement in education context refers to the process of determining the quantity. Take note of this word, quantity of achievement of learners by means of appropriate measuring instruments. So may dalawang key concept. One, quantity of achievement. Second is using of appropriate measuring instruments. That's why we introduced to you the different types, no, of assessment methods. Meron tayong different categories of assessment methods. Okay? Now, we also talk about measurement, no? The types of measurement. So yung measurement actually answers the question, how much or how many are achieving the target. Dapat as a teacher, meron kang target, no? That's why you have your objective, tama ba? Yung objective becomes your target. Pero the question is how many you want your students to achieve the target. So when you ask the question how many, then it refers now to measurement. Halimbawa, si Nico, no? Scores 16 out of 20 items in the test. How much? That answers the question how much. So 16 siya out of 20. Then you get the percentage, no? 16 over 20, that's times 100, that's the percentage. Then you see now that score itself refers to yung measurement ni Nico. Or you could ask the question, how many of my students achieve the passing score? If you have 40 pupils inside the classroom, magkano ba, how many, no, are achieving? So if our target, the national target is 75% proficiency level, so 40 times 75%, that is 40 times 75% is, anybody? You can just open your mic and say something. You. Very
30,
silent
sir.
mga teachers.
33.75, sir.
Okay, 30. Yes. May nag-answer ng 30, 37. So basically 30.
30, sir.
Oh, 30. So 30 out of 40 should achieve. Tama ba? Should
30.
achieve the passing score. So, meron ka ng number sa mind. So once you give the assessment to your students, of course, before assessment, nag-discuss ka ng topic, no? Once you give now your assessment, titingnan mo how many of the students are actually achieving the passing score. Kasi alam mo yung passing score or yung target mo is 30 out of 40. So if you are giving 4-item test, no, especially yung in my case, yung mga criterion reference test ko, yung mga short quizzes ko, in terms of 4 items lang. Halimbawa, may lesson ako ngayon. Tapos, conduct ko ng 4-item test. So, yung target ko is 75%. So, 4 times 75% is only 3. Tama ba? So, yung cut-off score ko is 3. Dapat makakuha ng mga bata at least 3 points. Otherwise, gusto ko perfect. Okay? So, now you are now looking how many of my students got the cut-off score, which is 3 if I'm giving 4-item test. So, 3, tingnan mo yung how many got the score, 3. Count mo siya. You get the frequency. Okay? In my case, when I was a teacher in the public school, meron akong graph, no? Meron akong table sa lesson plan ko. So, yung lesson plan ko, nakabar siya by 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I do not know if you remember when your teacher is asking you after a quiz, how many of you get 4? How many of you get 3? How many of you get 2? Meron ba kayong experience ganon?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Tas
Yes,
ikaw,
sir.
ang kada ko
The
ay
Yes,
reason,
sir.
okay. Good, good. That's good. At least you can relate. That is the reason, yun ang graph. No, that's the reason of getting the number of students or pupils achieving the target. So, in my case, ka-count ko. Okay, how many of you got 4? Oh, count siya. Lagay ko sa table ko. Okay? So, if, let's say, combine mo yung 4 of 3, number of students who got 4 of 3, if it reaches 30 or more than 30, na-achieve mo yung target mo. Tama? Okay? So, that's an example of measurement. Okay? Then we also did talk about 2 types, no, of measurement. We have objective measurement and subjective measurement. I think from your readings, you can differentiate the two, no? So when we talk about objective, sinabi natin, this measurement do not depend on the person taking the test. Kapag ang answer is letter A, talagang letter A yon, diba? You cannot change that. For example, one good example of objective measurement using selected response test, like multiple choice, true or false, match type test. No, these are examples of objective measurements. For subjective measurement naman, yung response rely on the perception of the test taker. Who can give an example of a test like this? Yung subjective yung measurement. Anyone?
Yes, sir.
essay, sir.
Essays.
Essays.
Essays, sir.
Okay, good.
Essay.
Good. So essay is a subjective measurement because yung answer ng mga bata relies on their perception, di ba? So sometimes subjective tayo. Oh, I could remember there was one student is complaining, "Gwapo ka yung content sa akong ang answer pero bakit zero?" Di ba? So when we look at the product or yung paper ng bata, of course, the penmanship is not too readable. So sometimes si teacher, "Sus, kapangit ba aning yang penmanship ko eh? So zero na lang ni, kini ko sabot." Diba? But the content is really good. But here comes a student na magandang penmanship ng bata, tapos binigyan, wala pa ni grade ni teacher, pero binigyan ng 100%. Ako agrado eh. But when you read the content of the paper, pabalik-balik lang yung paragraph, no? The same paragraph 1 is the same in paragraph 2, the same in paragraph 3. Pabalik-balik na ilan si teacher. Okay? So, this is very important. That's why to to lessen the subjectivity of this kind of measurement, you need to establish your sign up button. What we need to do para ma-lessen yung subjectivity of this kind of test.
Maghatag og rubric, sir.
Good. Thank you, Ma'am Denise. Set standards. Thank you, Ma'am Princess. Set ka ng standards. Meron kang criteria of scoring. Okay? So when you rate your student based on the criteria of scoring or scoring guide mo, yun lang, stick ka lang doon. Huwag ka nang, do not go beyond with your scoring guide. Right? So if your scoring guide is limited, focus on content and mechanics, doon ka lang. You don't consider anymore the penmanship, right? Kaya wala man siya sa imuhang scoring or sa imong criteria. Okay? So I hope you have seen also my scoring guide, my rubrics, so as you submit your outputs. So next is assessment, no? Concepts about assessment. Okay. There are many definitions now or descriptions. If you have read books about assessment, daming mga ideas about assessment, no? According to Miller, Lee, and Grundland, assessment is a method utilized to gather information about student performance. If you notice this one, I make use of these definitions. Later on, I will discuss this now briefly. Then, according to Black and William, assessment emphasize the importance of feedback. So dapat may feedback, then and signifying its purpose. Okay, so assessment dapat may feedback. I hope you have seen also my feedback in your submissions. No, you can make use of that, and then you can ask me question again if meron kang clarification with my feedback. Then another definition, it says it's an ongoing process aimed at understanding and improving student learning. Okay, ito naman, no? These are actually ideas or concepts about assessment. But let me anchor on the definition, no? On this idea, on this concept, that assessment is a process by which information is obtained, obtained relative to some known objective or goal. The question is, why I am doing assessment? Bakit mayroon akong assessment? Sometimes teacher, no? These are actually actual observations in the field. Pagpasok mo sa classroom and you see that your students are misbehaving, running, jumping from one chair to another, diba? So very unruly classroom. Pagpasok ni teacher, high blood agad si teacher. So anong gagawin ni teacher? Sabihan ng mga bata, everybody sit down, we'll have a long quiz. Diba? Long test. Naging punishment yung assessment, naging punishment yung test. So sometimes the question is, why do we give assessment? Because i-punish ba yung bata? I-punish ba yung students? Now, let's go back to the definition. We give assessment because we want to get information relative to your objective. That's why every lesson plan, meron siyang objective. Bawat lesson mo that you conduct in the classroom, meron kang objective. The objective goes for an assessment. You want to assess if na-achieve ba yung objective or not. Because, as I've said, yung sa cyclic process, yung data will help you, no? If you analyze mo yung data, it will help you improve not only the performance of the student, but also your performance as a teacher. Okay, so I hope you have absorbed the idea or the concepts on assessment. Then we also talk about the different purposes of assessment. Okay, by the way, meron pa akong note din, no? It says here, all tests are assessment, but not all assessments are tests. What do you mean by this? Yes, Ma'am Denise, you recognize.
Ang akong idea ani sir is there are assessment na mag-test sa imong knowledge, and there are also assessments that test your physical stature. For example, is kanang assessment sa doctor, sir. As na po, assessment for your personality or assessment for your mental health, sir. So
Okay.
dili siya yung knowledge tanan na pod siya assessment for other things. Mga kung ano sir.
Mhm. Okay. Any more? What's another idea? All tests are assessment, but not all assessments are tests. Aside from Kang Ma'am Denise. Yes, Ma'am Melanie.
Hello sir, para sa ko sir kay just like ang test man gud kay nag-focus lang siya sa achievements of sa ka-individual uh, in that specific subject kunwari. And then ang assessing is nag-consider siya dira sa mga skills, bali set na sa skills sa students. Yan, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Mel. Any more? Any more? Yes, Ma'am April. You're recognized.
For me sir kay not all assessment is dili man gud tanan assessment na himuon sa isa ka person makuan matagbo ang imuhang goals bitaw sir ana nga certain topic.
Okay. So I think you have points now that you have mentioned. So um, always remember this, no? Ang CP105 focus on basically more on objective test, right? So ang objective test is actually test, no? Okay, when you talk about let's say bigay ako ng multiple choice test yan, di ba? So paper pencil test din yan, di ba? So we associate test with assessment, tama ba? But it says here, not all assessments are tests. So pwede ko ako mag-assess without giving tests. So ano ba ito? Ano bang gagawin ni teacher without giving paper pencil test? I can still do assessment. Okay, so we have variety of assessment methods that we can use. If you have read the concepts in principles of high quality assessment, we talk about different categories of assessment methods. Diba? Mayroon tayong performance testing, which requires students to perform rather than giving them paper pencil test. Tama ba? Okay, so in other words, we can still assess students by just allowing them to perform, right? When they perform certain skills on stage, for example, especially in your PE, more of you are actually having your PE, but in your PE, you don't have to be given, although meron test pa rin, pero not necessarily all are actually assessed by paper pencil testing. Even assessed also by actual demonstrations. Tama ba? Right? So meaning, you can still be assessed even without giving tests. So this is the idea, no? So utilize that one. So go out with that idea na limited to testing lang yung assessment. No. Assessment is not limited to paper pencil test. We have a variety of categories of assessment methods that you can use. You need lang to pick the right category or right assessment methods. Now that's why you need to look at your objective, no, doon sa principles of clarity of principles of quality assessment. Meron tayong clarity of learning targets, diba? Minamatch natin yung mga objectives. We'll discuss it later on, no? So importante yun, no? So with that objective, ano ba dapat ang ibibigay ko ng assessment? Okay? So those are important points. Then we have also purposes of assessment, right? Dito sa purposes of assessment, we have assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. Now, in our course CPE105, this is assessment in learning. So meaning, it comprises all the purposes. In the previous curriculum, yung assessment sa sa 105, it's named as Ed 127. Yung Ed 127 is assessment of learning. So nakafocus lang siya sa summative assessment. So when we try to describe each, ang assessment for learning is basically it pertains to diagnostic and formative assessments. No? So yung mga criterion reference tests, yung mga outright quizzes ninyo, yung mga oral or recitation, these are actually part of your formative assessments. Now, these are actually assessment classified under assessment for learning. So yung purpose niya assessment for learning. So it is used to determine learning needs, monitor academic progress of students during a unit or block of instruction. While the assessment as learning employs tasks that provide students with opportunity to monitor their own learning. This is what we call metacognition, learning by uh, learning, thinking about learning, learning about learning, di ba? So this entails now reflection. That's why meron kayong mga reflection, di ba? Sa application lessons ninyo, meron kayong part doon nga you need to reflect of your learning, right? So yung reflection is individualized. It should be unique because each of us has different learning. Maybe I learn with this lesson, itong learning ko. And this learning could be not true to the other participant. That's why I always look, that's why in my instruction, the reflection should not be collective. It should be individualized because it's your own learning. That's why I encourage you to make use of singular pronoun, no? Like I, me, instead of we, us, no? So, dapat it refers to you, yun. Dapat gikan sa imo, ha? No? Ano bang learning mo? That's your own reflection. So, that's part of assessment as learning. We integrated one, no? In our assessment strategies. Dapat sa assessment strategies, meron kang reflections. Because you want to see, because these reflections supplements, no? These are supplementary assessment. This supplements your assessment in general to that certain participant, if the student is learning or not. Okay, that helps support. Then the assessment of learning pertains to summative assessments, like summative assessments, practical tests, term exams. No, these are actually tests conducted at the end of a unit or topic or course. So it is in relation to the curricular outcomes. Any questions? Wala na questions. Next is evaluation. Okay. Now, let me quote, no? According to Russell and Eration, 2012, evaluation is the process of determining the quality. Take note of this one, quality of achievement in terms of a certain standards. Now, if you notice doon sa measurement, quantity of achievement, ito naman quality of achievement. Then, anchored to a certain standard. So, ano bang standard? Dapat mayroon tayong standards. So, in case in our Philippine education, mayroon tayong standards. In fact, yung 75% naging national target siya, naging standard siya, di ba? So, yun ang demarcation line natin, 75. Pag nakakuha ang bata ng 75% proficiency level, we are meeting the target. Above 75 is exceed the target. That's now above the standard because ang standard is only 75. So if nakuha 75, that's equivalent to 100% already. Okay, yun naman ang target. Okay, nakuha ba? So that's meeting the target. But if you go beyond 75, that's exceeding the target. Okay, so you are now above the target. But if you get less than 75, that's below the target. Okay? So naging demarcation yung 75%. So dapat may standard. So we follow the same standard. If you have read, later on we'll be discussing na sa lesson 5, we'll be talking about assessment in the K-12. Remember, itong preparation nito ng CPE105 sa CPE106 are actually preparation for you to make assessments kung ano kayo na-assign, secondary schools or elementary. Okay? That's the idea. Not for college, huh? It's not for college, but for elementary or secondary schools. Okay. So ano pa ba? It is also a process that is designed to provide information that will help teachers make judgment. So meron tayong concept ng judgment, no? Because evaluation is relative to making judgment about a given situation. This means that assessment data gathered by the teacher have to be interpreted in order to make sound decisions. So meron kang decision. Yung evaluation, yung judgment mo will give you now your decision whether the student or the class can proceed to the next lesson or not. Now, let's go back to the idea katong akong table, di ba? So I'll be counting how many of my pupils get 4, get 3, get 2, get 1. If combine ko yung number of students getting 3 and 4, if I have 30 pupils out of 40, meaning nakuha ko yung target, tama ba? So my instructional decision then is to proceed to the next lesson kasi na-meet yung target. Okay? I have only 10 who were not able to get the cutoff score. So later on, we'll be talking about this 10. Ano ba gagawin natin sa 10 ito? But definitely, my instructional decision is to proceed to the next lesson because nakuha ko yung target. However, if the result combining 4 and 3 scores is only 20, half of the class only got 20 the cutoff score, meaning hindi ko nakuha yung target ko, tama ba? So, my instructional decision then is not to proceed to the next lesson because if yung next lesson was connected to my present lesson, definitely they will not learn the concepts. So all I have to do is to reteach, no? Reteach the lesson. Of course, when you do reteaching, you need to change also your learning or your strategies, no? Yung mga learning or instructional strategies mo, you need to change that one because you know already the outcome. Meaning, students were not able to understand the idea based on your activities. Nakuha ba yan? Now, let's say yung instructional decision mo is to proceed now to the next lesson. The question is, ano bang gagawin natin sa 10 na yun, sir? Yung 10 students, ano bang gagawin natin doon? Of course, you need to help those students also cope, no? When they proceed to the next lesson kasi hindi nila nakuha yung present lesson, meron silang problema. So you need to identify ano bang part dun sa lesson na hindi nakuha ng bata, yung 10 na pupils who weren't able to get the cutoff score. So you have to identify. So the best thing is you're gonna do is do remediation. Conduct remedial classes. The question is, kailan ba ako mag-conduct ng remedial classes? That should be immediate, that's outright. Basically, we do it maybe during lunch break, no? If the students are having their lunch in your classroom, maybe after the lunch, you can spend 20 to 30 minutes, no? An extra mile for the teacher, but it helps the student. Or you can do remediation doon after the end of class in the whole day. Let's say you always end at 4:30, you can spend 30 minutes. You can ask the students to stay for a while for 30 minutes, then conduct your remediation. Okay, do not do it tomorrow because tomorrow you'll be introducing new lesson. So you do it in that certain day, right? Any questions? It also answered the question, how good, no? How good or what is the achievement level of my learners? So this is now matching your standards with the result, no? Ito na yung sinabi natin, yung expected outcomes mo at saka yung actual results. Okay, so how good are my students? So if you have a table sa Department of Education, mayroon silang outline, no? So let me conceptualize the idea. Let me outline the idea. Let's say 75% is the target. That will be your demarcation line. So that would be your meeting the target. Above that one is exceeds the target. Below that one is, of course, does not meet the target. So how good are my students? If I have 30 out of 40 achieving the cutoff score, then nandoon sa meet the target. So the performance level, nandoon. Meaning, ang mga bata ko is meeting the target. They are now probably, let's say, category mo siya below average or above average. Nasa average yung level ng mga bata ko. Okay? That's how you interpret also. So you interpret that one based on certain standards. You always look at the standards. If you're working in the Department of Education, meron silang standards. So we'll be discussing that one in lesson 5. If you're working also in private schools, meron din silang standards, no? You can always check ano ba yung guidelines ng private school na yan. Okay, any questions? So we are now
None, sir.
in Q&A. So wala kayong questions. Let me go back to the case analysis, di ba? Mayroon tayong case analysis to. Yung si Miss Castillo, di ba? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Remember
Yes,
the
sir.
Miss Castillo. So the question, meron tayong question doon na i-relate natin yung yung situation ni Miss Castillo with regards to yung decision. Tama ba? Okay? So, if you try to relate it one with the concept of measurement, assessment, and evaluation, saan ba doon ang measurement? Saan ba doon ang assessment? Saan ba doon ang evaluation apply? I am more interested on if this happens in your classroom, what you are going to do. Diba, meron kayong mga answer doon, no? So, nag-vary yung mga answer, but there are most common, no, answers to all of you. But let me go back lang doon sa idea. So, let me just go directly because I have limited time. Taas pa tayo. So, the idea there, no, when we talk about measurement, no, ano bang ginamit ni Miss Casillo to measure? Ano bang tool to that she used to determine the performance of the student? Bakit masabi niyang low performing yung mga male students? So, meron tayong she conducted an English test, tama ba? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Meron siyang, that's an example of an instrument that she used. So the test itself is an example. That's where you get the measurement, no? So you don't nag-apply yung measurement. Then what about the assessment? Yes, tama si Ma'am Giselle, numerical data. Okay. What about the aspect of assessment? Definitely, mayroon yung mga learning objective si teacher, tama ba? Si Miss Castillo, mayroon siya mga learning objective. Di nakuha ng mga male students yung learning objective kasi of course, they are not around. Tama ba? So meron siyang graded English test doon, kinakandak, tapos walang performance yung mga bata doon, especially yung mga male students. Hindi na-achieve yung objective. So yung information obtained from that graded English test hindi na-achieve, meaning may nagkandak ng summative test si teacher, so walang basis for the performance. So that's where assessment, yung judgment ng teacher then, sinabi niya, students are low performing. So that statement alone, that remarks alone is actually a qualitative, no, remarks of the achievement of the students. Now, the evaluation aspect looks at the students' quality of achievement in terms of certain standards. Yung sa evaluation. Okay? So, pag sinabi ni teacher na low performing itong mga bata na to, based akong assessment, na wala na-achieve yung target, and based on the measuring tool, which is the grade English test. So, yung decision niya, binagsak ni teacher si male. Tama ba? So, literally, wala siyang decision actually na binagsak, pero based on the case, you can say, binagsak talaga. Pero this is now the twist. The parents actually complaining kay Miss Castillo. Bakit low performing yung mga bata? Remember, si Miss Castillo is only assuming, no, the new role of that grade. Kasi yung previous teacher na-assign na sa other schools. So, new teachers sa English. Now, the teacher, si Miss Castillo, doesn't know yung ano ba yung mga arrangement sa previous teacher. So she just implemented, mga rules and policies in the classroom and so on. So not knowing yung mga students are always absent Friday. Observation is Fridays and Mondays. Okay? Now the parents came over, nag-complain sila. Ma'am, bakit bagsak? And remember, I think two or one of the male students are actually candidate for valedictorian. So consistent honor siya from grade 1 up to the supposed to be to the current grade level. So consistent honor siya. Now, anong ginawa ni teacher before? Katong previous teacher niya. Meron silang, of course, arrangement. Okay, because Mondays, Fridays and Mondays, the people's actually working, no? I mean, they go down, they're actually from hinterlands, they go down, they help the parents. So, para hindi mabihan yung bata, they are actually doing some modules. So, extra mile na teacher, pero it helps also at the same time the student. So, dapat, you always conduct environmental scanning. Mag-ES ka muna, no? Tingnan mo, ano bang culture ng school na ito? Ano bang ginawa na teacher before? Ano ba ang klase ng mga students ko before you make your own policies, no? So that you can also help also your students. Importante yun, ha? Okay. So any questions with that? I hope you understand the relevance of assessment, measurement, and evaluation in that case. Any questions? None. Okay. Let me go directly to the next lesson. Topic, which is principles of high quality assessment. In these principles, we talk about clarity of learning targets, appropriateness of assessment methods, validity and reliability of tests, practicality and efficiency and ethics. Before I proceed, I have another question. These are actually learning objectives, no? These are actually learning objectives, but I want you to tell me which objective here is behavioral at saka non-behavioral. Okay? So I would know if you're able to differentiate between behavioral objective and non-behavioral objective. Okay. Okay, make a vote now. The objective is to know the parts and functions of the digestive system. Is this objective behavioral or non-behavioral? I have another similar question. No, this one. Go back to the activities. Check the item. So the item is to construct a model to demonstrate mechanisms of breathing. Now, for the first objective, to know the parts and functions of, remember the keyword is to know, right? Ang behavioral, ano ba yung behavioral? Okay, so let's talk about the first objective, clarity of learning targets. In the clarity of learning targets, dapat yung objective, this refers now to the objective of your lesson, ha? The objective should be stated clearly. So, paano ba natin state siya clearly? Okay, so we make use of behavioral terms. So, pag clearly stated yung objective, it means precise also, accurate also, at saka dependable yung assessment mo. Pag hindi clearly stated yung objective, meaning hindi din precise at saka accurate yung assessment. So, importante yon. So, the clarity of learning targets will also give you clarity in your assessment. Okay. So, ano ba yung behavioral objectives, yung statements? Dapat yung terms na ginagamit mo doon sa objective mo, that can be easily observed from your students. Pag sinabing to know, paano mo i-assess yung to know? Di ba medyo broad, vague? Tama ba? Okay. Hindi siya precise, hindi siya accurate. Rather, reconstruct yung objective. Instead of to know, I would say to identify the parts. So alam mo, doon sa assessment mo, sa test mo, you're going to look for a category that will help you assess to identify. Because the skill that you're going to develop along the way is identification. Rather, kung may pag to know, di siya kay klaro. Okay, so these are broad terms and these are non-behavioral. So pag sinabing behavioral, you can easily observe the behavior from your students. You can easily assess accurately the performance of your students. Question, item number 2, objective number 2 is to construct a model. to demonstrate the mechanics. The word construct, klaro kayo siya, di ba? Very clear. It's behavioral because you can easily observe that one when the students perform a certain project by constructing the model. Okay? So clear, maklaro mo siya. So it's the assessment is very accurate. That is why important yung first principle, the clarity of learning targets. When you prepare your lesson plan, dapat tingnan mo yung terms that you are using. Yung terms ba, behavior ba o hindi? If not, then do not use that one because, again, relative yung composition ng targets mo with your assessment. Right? So, these clarity of learning targets goes with the cognitive levels, now with the different domains, no? The psychomotor, cognitive, and affective domain. Any questions? Next is appropriateness of assessment methods. This is where we talk about the different categories of assessment methods. The idea of appropriateness of assessment method is actually alignment, no? There should be matching, no? Dapat mag-match yung, of course, yung objective mo at saka yung assessment methods mo. Okay? Daming considerations dito ha, because you also think of the level. If low level yung objective ko, dapat low level din yung assessment methods ko. Hindi pwede low level yung, let's say, yung objective mo is to identify the parts of the flower. Tapos yung assessment mo is to explain the functions of the flower. Di siya match, di ba? Sometimes we tend to forget this. Always refer to your objective. Yung objective is to identify the parts of flower. Bakit mag-explain yung bata? So, pa-identify mo sila sa assessment. That's the matching. So, that's the purpose of the appropriateness of assessment methods because you're going to identify ano ba yung appropriate assessment methods for this assessment or learning target. Okay? You have seen that one in your book, tama ba? Ang different categories, meron tayong, of course, written response instrument that you can have. The written response, you can use paper pencil test, checklist, and so on. Tama ba? Meron tayong performance, meron tayong oral questioning, and so on. So, those are different categories of assessment methods. Okay, next is test validity. This is also important, yet we do. The idea, validity is a degree to which the evaluations or judgments we make as teachers about our students can be trusted based on the quality of evidence we gathered. This is according to Wilming and Wilkstrom. Now, there are also different terms that you can associate with test validity. No? Test validity includes appropriateness, correctness, meaningfulness, and usefulness. Validity, a test is valid if the test measures what it intends to measure. Meaning yung talagang purpose ng test is for that purpose and tapos yung outcomes is relates to that purpose, then the test is valid. When you talk about reliability, it's different also, no? Reliability refers to how a characteristic is measured, or we talk about dependability or consistency. So if the test is given at this period, tapos i-retest mo yung bata with the same test, dapat it yields almost the same result. If the result is consistent, then that's what we call the test is reliable. Okay, so there are different types of validity and reliability. For validity, we have content-related evidence, criterion-related evidence, construct-related evidence. For test reliability, we also have different methods that you can use. We have stability. This refers to retest reliability of the test. No, then kanang test retest manggod is the same test conducted twice. So mayroon siyang time element, no? Time 1, time 2. But the time element is very important because the gap also, if has impact, no? Has impact to the results of the reliability of the test. Okay? Yung time gap. The longer the time gap, according to them, is the lesser is the correlation between the two tests. The closer the gap is the higher is the reliability. Because of course, memory factor is also involved. Okay. The second technique is approach or type is the equivalence or what we call parallel forms. No, parallel forms. Um, you give it once, kaya isa lang mo siya i-give. Pero you need to produce two forms in the same test. Okay, the same objective, but meron siyang item for A and item for B. But these two items differently constructed, but it measures the same target. Ba? In the board exam, I could remember when I was taking the board exam, when I took the board exam way back many years ago, um, three classification kami, no? So yung seat A has the same competency with seat B at saka set C. Pero yung number one namin is different sa number one sa B, different sa number one sa C. So di pwede mag-copy ka, no? Because we have different item numbers. But the item numbers sa A, B, C only measures the same competency. Okay? That's what we call parallel forms. Internal consistency reliability, you give the same test to the same group once. Ang nakaganda lang sa internal consistency reliability, unlike sa parallel forms, you need to prepare many test items. Okay, if you're intending to give seat A 100 items for different competencies, dapat meron ka ng 100 items for B. So that now makes you 200 items. Tama ba? Then plus mag validity pa ka, no? Or mag-matching pa ka sa test items. So i-times 2 mo siya. So 400 times 2, that's around 800 test items that you need to prepare. So the pool of items is very taxing. Unlike sa internal consistency, if you're going to prepare only 100 items, i-give mo siya doon sa same number of group, no, of test takers. But when you try to get the reliability of the test, imo lang siyang i-divide into half, no? Half. Dali lang. Okay? So we have also rater consistency, we have inter-rater consistency, and decision consistency, no, for the different types of reliability. Okay. Next is we have also discussed practicality and efficiency. Now, these are different now. Under practicality and efficiency, we have familiarity with the method. It's very important when you make use of certain methods, assessment method, make sure you are familiar with that method. Do not introduce certain methods that you are not familiar with, because mahirapan ka when you try to evaluate your students. So dapat familiar ka muna, ha? Then, time required is very important. Complexity of administration, dapat simple lang sana, no? Yung administer mo sa test should be easy to administer. Then, avoid questions, no, during the test or performance. Dapat yung instruction mo clear na. Hindi kay ongoing yung test, tapos mayroon pa mga bata mag-ask, Sir, saan man ni Sir number 2, number 3, dapat sa doon sa instruction plan clear na yun. Okay? Then, ease of scoring. Dapat madali lang ma-score yung mga test mo. Halimbawa, if you have around 20 sections, so scoring is very important at the same time. Ease of interpretation. Madali lang siya. That's why you need to have standards, no? Basically, mayroon tayong scoring guide. Then cost should be also practical and efficient. Okay? Economical is practical and efficient. Kung economical yung ano mo. Test. Next is we have also ethics. Ethics you need to consider. You have seen already your checklist now. We utilize all these principles of high quality assessment in the checklist, and we try to critique the exemplars based on these principles of high quality assessment. For ethics considerations, no, we need to remember in ethics, we talk about fairness. Now, fairness is an ethical issue. Remember that one. Now, paano ba maging fair yung test mo? So, importante, consider mo student knowledge of learning targets. Meron mang background ang bata doon sa learning targets. If wala siyang background, then mag-suffer yung bata, no? When they take the test. So transparency is defined here as disclosure of information to students about assessment. So importante yung knowledge ng bata about the learning outcome, at the same time yung paano ba sila i-assess. Huwag mong itago yung assessment or yung scoring mo sa bata. Tapos saka mo na siya ipalabas when you're trying to assess the student. No. So dapat i-share mo agad so that they will know what to do and how to improve their performance. Next is opportunity to learn. Importante yun, no? That's part of fair test. Dapat na fairness sa test, and it should be consistent with the instruction at the same time. Then, isa pa, prerequisite, no? Prerequisite knowledge and skills. If you have noticed, meron tayong mga prerequisite skills. Example for CPE105, basically ang prerequisite skills is your statistical skills. Dapat you have taken your statistics in your senior high school. So that helps, no? That helps, but not necessarily in this subject, but that helps you understand also the concepts of assessment. So dapat meron yan. You have to establish the prerequisite knowledge and skills. Then avoid student stereotyping in your test. Importante yun, ha? You know already what stereotyping. Then avoid bias in assessment and in your procedures, assessment procedures. Ano pa ba? Accommodate special needs. Not all students have the same learning styles. I could remember when I was teaching in elementary school, may isang teacher, no? Di ba, sa classroom meron tayong standards of reading, silent reading. I don't know if you remember that one doon sa front chalkboard, meron tayong poster doon, standards for silent reading, standards for oral reading. Diba? So this teacher now is doing silent reading. Sabi ng teacher, okay, get your book, open your books page, so and so, we'll have a silent reading. So you know already, ano bang standards for silent reading? Okay? Open your book, hold your book with your two hands, ano pa? Eye level, read with your eyes only. Diba? Do you remember that? Now,
Yes, sir.
Here comes one. Yes, thank you, Ma'am Mel, for responding. There's one one pupil na nakaganon sa desk. Ito ang book, nagganon. Okay? So, nakakita ni teacher, galit si teacher agad. You are not following the standards of silent reading. So now, si teacher is so angry, maya ka lang. I will throw all the questions to you. So after the silent reading, alam ni, teacher, galit si teacher. So all the questions thrown to this pupil. And you know already the story. Hindi nakasagot si pupil. Kasi pinagalitan ni teacher, nakaganon si pupil. Sabihin niya, hold the book. So nag-follow si pupil. Hold niyang book with two hands. Silent siya, nag-read. Tapos, hindi nakasagot sa mga answer. After a week or two, nalaman ni teacher, meron parang problema sa vision yung bata. The pupil has peripheral vision, meaning the pupil reads at the side. Okay? So, importante yon. You need to understand also your students or your pupils. So, accommodating special needs is very important. Sometimes, yung test paper is very small. May mga batang mga problema sa vision. Okay? So, nag-accommodate ba ng special needs yung test mo or hindi? Right? So, importante, those are considerations. Now, that's part of ethics. And that's part of fairness. Right? So, let's proceed now to the presentation of outputs. We have two groups, no? This morning, we have group 3 and group 6. So, I'll give the floor now to group 3 muna, then followed by group 6. Sa group 3, we have, you know already the group 3, no? Sino ba yung speaker ninyo? So, the group 3 will be showing to you the example. Ang test exemplar nila is science. For group 6 naman, ang test exemplar is English. Okay, so I'll stop sharing and I'll give the floor to group 3 and group 6.
Hello, good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. I am the representative of Group 3, Catherine Canyanio, and I will present our output on the activity of application activity critiquing of test exemplar. It's now present. Go on screen. Makita na, sir? Hello, ma-view na siya?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yes, Kat.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you po.
Ma'am,
So,
ma'am,
our...
ma'am
Yes,
Kat,
sir. Yes,
you can
sir.
go ahead with the ma'am, itong checklist na lang, ma'am.
Checklist, okay. Okay, sir.
Okay.
So, our checklist on teacher-made test, our remarks was based on the majority of the answers sa group. So, our clarity of targets, we answered yes. Is the learning targets clearly stated? Yes. Appropriateness, alignment of assessment methods, we also answered is the yes. Then content validity, we also answered yes. And practicality and efficiency, is the test easy to administer, score, and or interpret? We also answered yes. On the fairness, we answered no up to ethics. So, in fairness, is there a potential stereotype that threat in the test items? We haven't seen anything yung potential na nag-stereotype siya sa test items, so we answered no. Also, is there a potential offensive item in the test? We also answered no. Although they have a topic about reproductive system, but it is a subject, not just a science subject that also helps them to be prepared during sa ilang puberty stage. Lastly, is the test sensitive to or accommodate special needs? We also answered no. Marami nakita nga sa items and the test exemplar nga need siya accommodate special needs or maybe need siya during the taking the test, like what said sir nga tawag nito kanang sa pagbasa or maybe some instructions nga not fully understand sa students based sa iyang capacity sa understanding. And then on the ethics, is the test requires the test taker to answer sensitive issues. We also answered no. So in our comments, the second test sample is clear and understandable, and all of the graphics are clear. The topic is appropriate for the subject, and the items in the test example correspond to the learning objectives. The assessment methods being administered was selected response format. It is either a checklist or an objective test. Whether it is objective and efficient, especially in grading, assessing, and scoring. The given text example accomplish in assessing the hierarchy of educational objectives that can be seen in the table of specifications. So we also think that the test example focuses only on the objective test. It would be better if it also includes a subjective type of test, requiring the test takers to formulate their own answers in response to the given questions through labeling a diagram or fill in the blank. A combination of selected response format and constructed response format, or which is brief constructed response. In addition, the test example does not require test takers to answer sensitive questions or issues, or the test example is being insensitive with the test takers. All mentioned private parts such as the sex organs, ovary, menstruation, and menstrual cycles are all normal, including the question, is it okay to borrow underwear from a friend, which will be answered no because it can cause undesirable organism to genitals. This type of test is a good way of letting children test takers know the result if they share something like personal belongings with others. Also, in this part, it also prepares students to be in their puberty stage. That's all lang po. Stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Kat. Next, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. So, to those who don't know me, I am Melanie Abeliar Takan, and I am with Giselle Dayan Capin. We are from the same course, which is BTL Ed Home Economics. So, we are tasked to share our checklist. So, guys, please allow me to share my screen. All right. So this is our checklist, and we are the group six. This is our checklist after critiquing the test exemplar in the subject, in English subject. So, Ma'am Dayan Ma'am Giselle will be the one to read the indicators and the answer of the group. Ma'am Giselle.
Thank you, Ma'am Mel. So we have here the six indicators. First is the clarity of target. Second is appropriateness or alignment of assessment method. The third one is content validity. The fourth one is practicality and efficiency. The fifth one is fairness. And the last one is the indicator of ethics. So in the indicator of clarity of targets, our group decided to answer no. Later, we will know the reason behind it. Next, for the appropriateness or alignment of assessment methods, we agree that the method used is appropriate or aligned to the learning target, so we answer yes. In the third one, which is the content validity, we agree that there is a match between the test items and the learning objective. However, we can say that there are some items which are not. Same goes with the practicality and efficiency. Since it's more on multiple choices, we think that it would be easy for us to determine and interpret and administer. In the indicator of fairness, our group decided that we answer no to the three guided question because we didn't see any potential stereotyping trait, potential offensive items, and sensitive tests that accommodates special needs. In the last indicators, which is the ethic, our group decided that we answer no to the guide question because we didn't see any sensitive issue that the test taker may answer. Lastly, we have our comment to be read by Ma'am Melanie Takan. Ma'am Melanie.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Giselle. So for our comments, the group knows that the indicators above helps us to classify whether the test paper itself could give an impact on the learner, as well as knowing how wide their knowledge in a specific subject. The questionnaires learning target was not clearly stated, especially sa last part of the paper of items 40 to 45 or to 50. We've observed that there are some questions written that do not make any connection with the objectives written in the table of specification. However, we can say that it targets the appropriateness or alignment of the assessment method because questions are well arranged and do not have to cross the different topics. In the content of validity, there are higher numbers of items, which shows the validity of every question that relates to the subject. Unfortunately, we found one part that consists of 4 items that do not show any validities at all. This type of question should not be indicated in the learning objective or test because it doesn't really connect to the learning target of the test exemplar. Well, generally, we can say that there are some topics in the test paper that does not match the learning objective, especially in the last part of the test, is what I've said. However, the test is easy to interpret. We can say that it is easy to interpret because the type of exam nagihatag is more on multiple choice. Yeah, just like what Ma'am Giselle said. We teacher should value unity, alignment of the questions, and the connection between the contents of test exemplar and learning objectives. And that ends our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Mel and Ma'am Giselle for the presentation, and also Ma'am Catherine from Group 3. Okay, so thank you groups for your outputs, and I believe no, you were able to capture the critique, no, your critique on the test exemplar, both science and English. Now, yung important point lang is yung when you critique the test exemplars, you look at the different indicators doon. The indicators are actually the different principles of high quality assessments, no? So, titingnan natin if nandoon ba yun or wala. Then if nandoon yun, then you need to support that one. No, tama yung ginawa ninyo. You supported only the number of items or citing some items in the test to support your checklist. Okay, so that's good, no? So I will not discuss further because there are also other groups who aren't able to submit yet. So I'll be checking, no, and I'll be giving individual feedbacks to the group with regards to the outputs. Now, let me emphasize lang yung content validity ha. Yung content validity is looking into the match between you're trying to see if the assessment methods used addresses the learning competencies or learning objective. So you look into the match between the test items and the learning objective. So if hindi siya nag-match, then you need to revise or refine the test item. That's why this is very important when you do also your preparation for your assessment tests. Later on, when you do your final project now, which is the construction of test items. So you apply all these concepts sa pinaka-outcome sa course. Okay? So let me proceed now to lesson 2 para wala na tayo, medyo kulang lang time. Lesson 2 talks about types of selective response tests. Although we have variety of tests, but we only limit now in this mode of learning, we limit only into 3 types of selective response tests, which are the multiple choice test, binary or true or false test, and match type test. So before we proceed, meron akong isang question. Can we answer? Which selected response test consists of a stem and an alternative? Check the poll. You can take a vote. I'll give you 10 seconds. Which selected response test consists of a stem and alternatives? So most of you answered multiple choice. Tama. The correct answer is actually multiple choice. No? Multiple choice has a stem and an alternatives yung part. So let me go first with the binary choice, or I'm sorry, wala ako naka-share. Dali ha, share ko muna. So binary choice or alternate form. Basically yung true or false, because binary kasi dalawang choices lang siya eh. True or false. Yes, no. Di ba? Meron tayong mga variety of binary choices. No? Katong true or false, yes and no. Di ba? Sa baba. Basta kay 2 lang. No? 2 lang ang choices. So, these are examples of binary. So, yung part ng, ano ba yung mga parts ni binary choice or alternate form? So, meron siyang statement or direct question and option. Okay, then I hope you have seen also the guidelines. Now, meron tayong tips on how to construct this type of test. Hindi lang basta-basta mag-construct ng test. Dapat follow those guidelines. Those are not absolute rules, but those are tips given by people who have done this test, no? Yung mga experts. Next is multiple choice. Ito na, multiple choice test, pinaka-popular, no? Even in your board exam, they're using multiple choice test. So it consists of a stem and alternatives. Those alternatives naman, meron tayong mga key answer and distractors. Okay? Now, ang question is, sir, how many options ba dapat sa multiple choice? It should be greater than 2 kasi pag 2 lang siya, binary na siya, di ba? So, multiple choice test is greater than 2. Okay? At ideally, practical good is 4 options or 5 options. Yan ang pinaka-practical. In yung board exam, I think it's 5 options. No? Siya ay 5 alternatives. Which one there is the key answer? The other options are actually distractors. We have also guidelines. I want you to go over with the guidelines because you're gonna use this guidelines when you construct your test. So you'll be constructing your own test later on this part of this course. So please review those guidelines. I don't have to repeat all those guidelines. They have examples in each guideline that you can check. Then if you have any questions with regards to that, then let me know. Right? Then we have also match type test. This is also common, no? Match type test is considered as modified multiple choice test. It consists of 2 parts pa rin. We have the premise column and the response column. Ang pinaka-idea gid sa match type test, when you make your match type test, the item should be homogeneous. 1. If you're using terms and definitions lang on that certain topic. Okay? Terms and definitions, wala siyang solution siguro, no? Walang calculations. So, dapat uniform siya, ha? Then, there are two types of match type test. We have perfect match type and imperfect match type. Pag sinabing perfect match type test, meaning yung number of items in column A at saka column B, pareho sila. If there are 5 items for column A, 5 items then for column B. So, this is what we call perfect match type. Pag hindi siya the same number of items, let's say, there are more number of items in the response column, we call it imperfect match type. Okay, usually, there are more choices doon sa response column kaysa column A. Okay? They try to make use of that in yung imperfect match type test because to avoid guessing. Kasi pag perfect match type ka, pag abot mo sa last item, sa fifth item, alam mo na yung isa, pwede rin mo i-guess out, no? So, ang last two items, i-guess out mo A or B ba? Rather, if you have more options in response column, that would lessen the guessing part. Okay. However, there are also teachers who make use of perfect match type test, but were able to lessen guessing. How? You can utilize items in the response column twice as an answer to column A. So when to use, remember yung mga homogeneity of parallel concepts, terms and definitions, object pictures and labels, symbols and proper names, cause and effect. These are examples of parallel concepts. This is where you make use of match type test. No? So yung match type test, unlike multiple choice test, ang multiple choice test is more flexible compared to match type test because ang flexibility ng multiple choice test is can measure low level up to higher level. It will encourage critical thinking when kung properly constructed lang yung multiple choice test. Oh. Unlike here, basically more on low level yung match type test. At saka yung true or false, no? Remembering and true or false eh. No? Dapat memorization, dapat naka-memory of those concepts. Whereas multiple choice is higher, no? It can measure lower thinking skills at saka higher thinking skills. So flexible siya. Okay. So I have one, ako gining pugo si Mamel to present her outputs. Okay, so I'll give the floor now to Mamel. Let's stop
Thank you,
sharing.
sir.
Thank you, Mamel, for responding
No problem,
positively.
sir.
Thank you.
All right, good morning once again. Allow me to share my screen. Ay, saan ito? So, this is our activity 2. This is an individual activity. So, I am tasked to share my activity sheet. So, we are tasked to identify what type of test or format ang mosulod aning 3 ka-learning competency. So first is to identify, first learning competency is identify the characters of the story. Second is add fraction with similar denominators. Third is compare the characteristics of reptiles and amphibians. So all we need to do is to make a sample test item. Just one sample test item. So for identify the characters of story read, I classified it as a selection type or a multiple choice format. It's like this. For example, sample test item number 1, Jacob and the Cupcake. So it is actually a short story with a question selection type for this one. Darren Jacob mother. Let me read it. Jacob wanted to make a cupcake. He went into the kitchen and got out flour, vanilla, sugar, and egg. Jacob combined all the ingredients in a big bowl and put the cupcakes inside the oven. Jacob could not wait to eat his cupcake. So the question, kinahanglan mako-inside siya sa ato ang learning competency. So my first question is, who was the character in the story? So that's Jacob. Next, let's proceed. It's add fractions with similar denominators. So I classified it as a performance type of test. So an example, Yari, is for instruction at a given fraction below and shade the empty diagram accordingly. Okay, so mo ni siya. Ning sulod siya para sa kuning coincide siya sa atong learning competency di ani sa pangkaduha. Okay. Lastly is compare the characteristics of reptiles and amphibians. So ako siyang gi-classify as a supply type na test. So students kay write the characteristics of reptiles and amphibians on the table below. So even though ang instruction di ani kay write the characteristics, unya ang naa di ani sa learning competency nako is compare. I think mag-coincide gihapon sila kay students can also think about what's the about sa characteristics sa reptiles and amphibians. Yan na lang. We teachers should also consider about sa learning competency on how we make the test item. Thank you. That answer.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Mel. If you have seen, no, meron tayong types of or formats of test or test type that would align with your objective o yung objective na yun at saka yung sample test item. Now, Ma'am Mel, ang number 2, you mentioned performance test, no? But however, your test item is more of supply test or completion siya kasi meron kang box end. So I suggest mas appropriate yung supply type doon sa sa column 2, right?
Okay, sir.
So, but most of the items are
sir.
actually good, no? The items you have given as a sample, I think they are really good examples to measure the objective. So, congratulations. Thank you so much for sharing also your output, Mamel. Let me proceed to lesson 3, no? Although wala pa tayong outputs ito, I have not seen yet submitted lesson 3, but I'm just going to present this because this is our target, no? So, yung final virtual meet na to focus on lesson 4 and lesson 5. However, the presentation of this output will be done on our final virtual meeting. Now, for lesson 3, it talks about interpretation and assessment results. And here we tackle about item analysis, classical item analysis statistics, and how to do item analysis. This is very important because item analysis will help improve, no, your test as a whole. So pag sinabing item analysis, you are going to analyze each item in the test. If you have 50 item test, then that calls for 50 item analysis. So that's per item. Kuha ba? So ano ba yung item analysis, no? Here it examines, no, student responses to the individual test item. So process na siya is a process that examines student responses to individual test items or question in your test in order to assess the quality of those items of the test as a whole. So titingnan mo yan as a whole. Then another concept that you need to remember, it also eliminates, no, ambiguous or misleading items in a test. That's why during item analysis, you need to look into the item if this item can be discarded or dapat i-revise ko yung item or i-retain ko yung item na yon. Okay, so that's part of the item analysis. Item analysis also is valuable for increasing instructor skills in test construction. Along the way, it will help you also improve your skills in test construction because you're able to identify specific areas of the course content which needs greater emphasis in the clarity. The item analysis will help also identify better students from poorer students. Okay, so another one is we have classical item analysis. We talk about reliability doon sa principles of high quality assessment. That's part of the item analysis actually. But the reliability of the test looks at the test level as a whole. Whereas another classical item analysis for statistics is index of difficulty and index of discrimination. This is where sa index of difficulty, you're trying to look into, no, or this can be inferred from the number of students who answer the item correctly. So you always focus, no, on the number of students who answer the item correctly. The idea there is looking on the correct responses of the student. For index of discrimination, okay, um, this refers to, no, the it is defined as the item's ability to distinguish between those who know the answer and those who merely guessing. So that's why meron tayong ah, upper group, lower group. So you're trying to divide the number of test takers in terms of grouping sa upper group or lower group. So most likely yung mga nasa upper group, they always get the item correctly. But if the items, yung mga difficult items, yung mga nasa lower group were able to get it correctly, tapos yung nasa higher group were not able to get it correctly, then definitely if you try to look the comparison between the discrimination index, negative yung discrimination index kasi maraming nakuha sa lower group compared to the higher group. So if the answer is negative, then there's a problem with the items. Okay? So you need to look into the test items. Okay, as I've said, ang discrimination index will also help you distinguish between those who know the answer and those who do not know the answer. And that those nasa lower group, sometimes we assume na nag-guess lang sila. Or maybe they have a correct guess. Okay. Then we have also the structure analysis. Very important, no? Dapat yung structure mo is also effective. Dili lang siya, when you look at the options, uy, hala, klaro kayo, no? Ma-discriminate sa bata nga kini siya ang answer compared to the distractors. Dapat yung distractor mo have the same, no, effectivity with the key answer. Then, how to item analyze, meron tayong steps on how. Okay? So, I hope in the ebook nandoon yon, yung mga steps, meron tayong mga samples doon how to do it. Okay? And then, in the application activity on this part, you're going to analyze no certain test. Meron tayong given data that you're going to analyze, tapos tanaw mo yung mga test items. Whether the item should be discarded or need to be revised. All right? Kung wala na kayong questions, or maybe you can ask questions, you can post questions later on in our MOLI. Now, reminders, this is our attendance link. I-share ko muna ang attendance link sa chat box. Okay, so you can fill up the attendance link. So once you fill up the attendance link, you will receive again a certificate of attendance. Now, reminders lang also, katong wala pa na, of course, you cannot proceed with the lesson, no, kung hindi ka nag-sign sa learning contract. So far, I have seen 62, no, from both sections, 62 out of 74 who responded the learning contract. Importante yung learning contract. Meaning, meron pa tayong 12, no, hindi nag-start sa lesson. Then, final meet natin December 17. That would be the end of classes because by January is the exam week. So, dali na kayo itong schedule. So, hope you're able to timeline your activities. Huh? Then, you can still work during vacation, Christmas break, but it's up to you. But as long as you know already our timeline. So, the final meet focus on lesson 4 and lesson 5. Definitely, we'll have also presentations from lesson 3. So, I'll be again selecting other groups to present in lesson 3 outputs. Then final exam, this will be scheduled on January 4. It will be open 8 o'clock until the midnight. Okay, so you can take any time. This is timed. So once you click start sa final exam, the time is running for 2 hours. So 2 hours lang time limit for the exam. 50 item test, multiple choice. Right? So multiple choice because remember, this part of your practice in the part of your practice as you will be taking your board exam. Okay, so that ends our virtual meet. Thank you for coming and happy lunch, everyone.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye,
Bye,
sir.
guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Bye,
sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.